So hello, I am Jen. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll jump right in. So I am here to talk about numbers. First off, I want to thank everybody who made this survey possible, which includes all of you who are here because you're volunteers or you're interns. So you are creating the data that we are collecting, which is awesome. I also want to thank the regional liaisons for getting the word out, and then anybody who filled that out. And if you're curious if your organization participated in the survey, you could always ask your leadership in the volunteer department or the internship department. So I'm going to get started a little bit about the history of the volunteer benchmarking here for AZA. So the VMC started a survey in 2012, and it had two goals. It wanted to benchmark. So it wanted to allow program leaders to compare and evaluate their programs against other programs, specifically zoos. We also wanted to remain adaptable over time. And the second goal was to be able to spot trends. We wanted to keep those questions consistent so that we could compare data year over year, and then make sure that we understand that changes do happen. And so we might eliminate questions or have to alter questions. And a great example of that was during COVID. So we have been applying these trends as we rebuild from COVID to understand goals and accomplishments in the volunteer realm and internship realm. So when we designed the survey, we want to make sure we focused on core questions that allowed us those long-term benchmarking calculations. And I'll go into those just a little bit in a few minutes. And then again, like I said, we altered some of the questions because of COVID, and we wanted to make sure that we still wanted to get that core data. So we really reduced the survey. So but we got, again, that core data. And then, so an example of that is the volunteer services staffing. We wanted to be able to track how that staffing, what happened before we had the data, and then during COVID, and then after. So I'm going to focus on that as an example here in just a second. And then, of course, the distribution and collection of the results of the data that you guys are sharing with us. So we do send this survey out annually to all organizations in the AZA that have a volunteer and intern program. And then, but we wanted to make sure that we were comparing similar organizations to each other, because there are some beautiful small zoos in AZA, and then there's some ginormous zoos in AZA. And so as they were designing the original survey, they took a look, and they decided that they were going to sort survey responses by the budget category. So AZA already classifies organizations into these small, medium, large, and extra large classifications depending on their organizational budget amount. So this is how much your zoo spends overall, not the volunteer budget. That would be amazing, but it's not the volunteer budget. It is the organization's budget overall. So we have that small, medium, large, and extra large categories. And then because we have those core questions, we can spread that data over a long period of time. So for example, down here at the bottom, you can see the different colors represent the different size of organizations, budget size of organizations. And then as you go across, you have from 2013, we have data all the way up till 2022. We're still working on 2023's data now. But you can see the participation in the survey. And then you can also see that huge dip in 2019 and 2020. And now we're starting to get back up. So there was a lot less participation. A lot of staff got laid off. There were people that there just weren't people who knew to do the survey. And so it was really tough to get that data. But we are starting to build back up. So now we got this data, and we love to use Legos as an example because it visually represents what we're talking about. So the data is a big jumble. We have all these numbers, all this different information. So we arrange it by the different budget class size. We have small, medium, large, and extra large. And then we sort it into those. We arrange it based on what is this data telling us, and then we visually present it. And then the final step is to explain it with a story so that whether it is the volunteer coordinators or managers or those that manage interns can use that information to help advocate for their programs. So how does this impact you? It identifies the average for comparison. It's kind of interesting to know, is your zoo like shooting for the stars? Are they excellent within a certain area? Or are there different areas that you could improve? And then it, again, provides data for program advocacy. And I'm going to use the staffing example here because we have a lot of data on that. So for example, paid volunteer services staff on average work at a ratio of 1 paid staff member to about 428 volunteers. So that's a lot of people. And so we can look over the years, and I find this one really interesting because it's very prominent where COVID happened, and a lot of departments got a lot smaller. And so you can kind of see that trend as it goes, and we're still working our way back up to what normal would be. So hopefully that number changes. But as you are, if somebody is new in their role, they can take a look at this and say, hey, we have over 900 volunteers. We should have 2 people helping them to support our program, to support our volunteers or our interns. And they can use this information to help advocate, to get support, to make sure that volunteers are supported. Okay, so we're going to go through a few of the different results to get that big picture of the impact that everybody has. So we're first going to cover internships. So here's just a high-level overview of internships. So internships was not originally part of the core information. So we have just started collecting this since 2019. So we don't have as much information as we do about the volunteers, but it's still a very interesting trend. So again, you can see the impact of the pandemic, whereas in 2019, there was well over 3,000 interns that were unpaid at AZA institutions, and then it drops dramatically. The interesting thing is then we start to measure paid interns. And so in 2022, there was a small number of paid interns, and I'm very interested to see how this trend changes as we move forward. So another item that I just want to show you is that we talk about whether it's paid or unpaid. So in 2022, there was actually 46% of respondents said they did have paid opportunities, which was very interesting and kind of is definitely different than data that we get from other sources. So is that, I'm not sure how exactly to interpret that, but is it AZA is better at providing those opportunities? Is, just who knows? We just look at the numbers. We don't always know the why. So AZA has all those paid internships. How were interns compensated? So 46%, 46% of those that did have interns say they were compensated in some way. And the compensation varied pretty greatly. So 32% got paid by the hour, 15% got a stipend, so just a large sum at some point. Scholarships were another one. And then we had a significant number of other, and that could have been housing, outside funding. So the zoo actually didn't provide that. And then again, just a huge chunk of internships are just not funded at this time. And then from there, it's a lot of outside support, whether it's through grants or federally funded, other organizations, including colleges and universities. And just a small wedge of that actually comes from the zoo, the operational budget. Right, so volunteer numbers. Okay, so in 2022, there was over 527 individuals that gave time to AZA organizations, donating over 5 million hours. I'll just let that sit there for a second. That's a significant group of people. supporting saving wildlife and wild animals, and so much time given. It's an amazing thing. So give yourself a pat on the back. I wanted to show you some trends over the years and the number of individuals volunteering with AZA. It's so crazy because we hit this giant peak in 2019 and then things kind of plummeted. So we have data from 2012 through 2022, and you can see the trends as they go. And again, that is the total number of people volunteering at AZA institutions. And then we have the total number of hours, and this is million of hours. So we're not back up to hours post-pandemic yet. We had a lot of hours. And so is this a new trend? Are volunteers not giving as many hours? Are they, just we can investigate. Will it keep going up? Not sure, but it is definitely increasing again. And then we can overlap volunteers and hours. So you can kind of see how they, it naturally follows each other, which is what is expected. The interesting thing is that the number of hours is kind of going down, but the number of volunteers is going up. So maybe next year the hours will be much higher. So it'll be interesting to see how those trends continue. So with all that base data that we have, all that core data, we're also able to calculate things like the value. So every dollar that it's invested into volunteer programs at AZA institutions brings a value back to AZA, and it's just increased over time. So you can see in 2015, every dollar brought a $35 return in investment. You'll notice that 2020, 2021 was higher, but and that's due to our amazing volunteer force that stayed committed, gave tons of hours, even though our budgets were cut significantly, but that's not sustainable. So it will drop back down, which it started to do, yeah. So the big picture in 2022, again, 5.3 million hours of service to our aquarium and zoos, and an in-kind value of over 169 million. You guys are a passionate, committed group making a huge impact. So yeah, those are the numbers.